Don't go to your husband's viewing. Instead, go to your sister's house and you will see everything. I received that note on the very day of my husband's wake. I thought it was a cruel prank, but I decided to stop by my sister's house anyway, and when I opened the door, I was paralyzed by what I saw. But before I continue, tell me in the comments what city you're listening from. I'd love to know how far my story has traveled. Chloe was 36 years old. In just the last 48 hours, her face seemed to have aged more than it had in the last 5 years. The dark circles under her eyes were deep trenches of exhaustion. Her hair was hastily tied back, her hands trembled, and a chill ran through her body, a mix of the early morning cold and the crushing weight of grief. She was in the kitchen of her home in Maple Creek, Ohio, making coffee she had no intention of drinking. The air was thick with the scent of funeral flowers, incense, and a profound sense of absence. The house was enveloped in a silence that wasn't peaceful, but rather a deep, echoing chasm. Everything was ready for her to leave for the funeral home: the black dress, the low-heeled shoes, the shawl Ethan had given her on their last anniversary. She was about to get dressed when she heard the clatter of their mail slot. A white envelope, with no return address. No stamp or postmark, nothing, just a message written in large, block letters with black ink that was coarse and uneven. Don't go to your husband's viewing. Instead, go to your sister's house. He is not alone. Chloe froze by the door. She held the envelope in one hand and the shattered pieces of her life in the other. She read the words over and over, unable to grasp their meaning. At first, she thought it was a sick joke, one of those pranks that hurt more than 1,000 cuts, especially when you feel like you have nothing left to bleed. But the note didn't feel like a threat or a simple taunt. It was precise, addressed to her, and it mentioned Olivia, her sister. She tried to think logically. Maybe it was delivered to the wrong house. Maybe it was a nosy neighbor, a cruel attempt to lead her astray. But the note had the unnerving accuracy of someone who knew secrets, and something inside her, a voice she hadn't heard since childhood, screamed at her not to ignore it. She remained standing at the entrance of her house for several minutes, clutching the letter tightly. A part of her wanted to rip it to shreds, throw it into the fire, and go to the viewing as she was supposed to finally put her pain to rest. But the other part, the part that had started to ache long before Ethan died, wouldn't let her move. Olivia's house was only 4 blocks away. A small bungalow she had rented after separating from her husband, Caleb, 2 years ago. She and Chloe had never been close. There was a 5-year age gap and entirely different lives. Awkward silences punctuated every family gathering. But when Olivia got divorced, Chloe gave her a spare key to their house, just in case she ever needed help. She also kept a key to Olivia's place, just in case. She never imagined that just in case would arrive tainted by poison. With the note in her pocket and a knot in her heart, Chloe looked at her watch. 2 hours until the service. 2 hours to say goodbye to Ethan. 2 hours to close a chapter, or to open a completely new one. She grabbed her coat and her keys and walked out without a second thought. The November wind hit her face like a slap. She walked quickly, as if afraid her own thoughts would catch up to her. She passed silent streets, watered lawns, and neighbors getting ready for their Sunday, oblivious that a neighbor's soul was about to be crushed. When she arrived in front of Olivia's house, everything looked normal. The windows were closed, the small garden was filled with wilting plants, and the mailbox was overflowing with flyers. There was no indication that anything unusual was happening inside, but as she approached the door, the smell of freshly brewed coffee stopped her, and there was something else. A man's cologne, a scent she knew intimately. Her heart pounded in her chest. The same scent she had smelled on their pillows, on his clothes, in the car, for years. Ethan's scent. It couldn't be. It was impossible. Ethan was dead. He was in a cold casket, pale, or at least that's what they had told her. She fumbled in her bag. The key was there, the key she had completely forgotten about. With a trembling hand, she inserted it into the lock. The door opened effortlessly, without a sound, as if the house had been waiting for her. Inside, it wasn't quiet. There were footsteps, voices, one female, one male. Laughter, the clinking of cups, a radio playing softly. An ordinary domestic scene. Except Chloe was in mourning, and her husband was supposed to be dead. She slipped off her shoes so as not to make a sound and walked barefoot down the hallway, guided by the sound of silverware and laughter. She froze when she heard a man's voice say, "Is there any more sugar? You know I like it sweet, sweet." It was Ethan's voice, his voice without a doubt, the voice that had woken her up so many times with promises, whispers, lies. "You're going to get diabetes," Olivia replied, laughing. "But okay, I'll make you another one." Chloe held her breath. The world was spinning, and she couldn't move. Every step she took was a new wound. She approached the kitchen. The door was slightly ajar, and through the opening, she saw them. Olivia, wearing a simple house robe, barefoot, pouring coffee, and Ethan, sitting at the table. His hair was wet, he was in pajamas, and he wore a smile just like always, as if he wasn't dead, as if he had never died at all. She didn't scream. She didn't faint. She didn't throw anything. She just stood there, watching, frozen. Olivia came up from behind and stroked Ethan's shoulder. Ethan took her hand and kissed it. Then Olivia kissed the top of his head. They looked like a couple who had long shared mornings, secrets, and a bed. Chloe took a step back, then another. She stumbled on the doorframe, catching herself on the wall. The hallway seemed to stretch into infinity. The air was heavy, her chest ached. Betrayal had a bitter, acrid taste, as if it were burning her tongue. She left the house without closing the door. She walked barefoot on the cold cement sidewalk until she reached the corner. There, she stopped. She leaned against a lamppost and looked at her hands. They were shaking as if they weren't part of her body. She asked herself if she was dreaming, if this was a nightmare brought on by grief, if at any moment she would wake up in her bed with Ethan asking her if she wanted tea or coffee. But she didn't wake up. The cars passed by as if nothing had happened. The birds chirped. The city carried on, alive, just like her husband. Meanwhile, at the cemetery, the casket was being lowered into the ground. Ethan's mother was sobbing. His brother was reading a poem. Friends were leaving flowers. And Chloe wasn't there, because Chloe had discovered the truth, or at least a part of it. She walked back to her house, slowly. Her feet were dirty, her stockings were torn, and her soul was in pieces. The car service driver was waiting for her by the gate, a look of concern on his face. "Are you all right, Mrs. Vance? Should I take you now?" She looked at him but couldn't answer. She went inside, locked herself in the bathroom, and threw up. Then she just sat on the floor, crying silently. Ethan was alive, and he was with her sister. All this time. The story everyone had told her, the death, the hospital, the illness, the death certificate, was all part of something darker, something she didn't yet fully understand. The phone began to ring incessantly. Her in-laws, her sister-in-law, friends. No one understood why she wasn't at the funeral. No one knew what she had seen. She turned off the phone. That night, she didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling for hours. She replayed every word Ethan had said in the last few months. The excuses, the absences, the change in his tone, the silences she had once attributed to work stress. Now they were all signs, and she had ignored every single one. At 5 a.m., she read the note again. "Don't go to your husband's viewing. Instead, go to your sister's house. He is not alone." Who wrote it? Who knew the truth and decided to warn her? And why? She stood up and looked out the window. The street was empty. But for the first time in her life, Chloe understood something. Death isn't always the end. Sometimes, it's just the beginning of hell. Morning came without her having slept a wink. The image of Ethan, alive and drinking coffee in Olivia's kitchen, was burned into her mind like a photograph she couldn't unsee, even with her eyes closed. There was no room left in her chest for even a single tear. She was dry, hollow, but alive, and the idea of being alive after being buried alive by betrayal was what got her off the floor. She turned on the water heater, moving mechanically, barely feeling her own body. With every step through her house she found memories, a mug with their linked initials, an old note on the fridge, the shirt he had left on the sofa before his death. The air still carried his scent, the scent of a man who had laughed at everyone. The phone vibrated on the dining table. 43 missed calls, all with recurring names: mother-in-law, sister-in-law, cousins, friends. Their messages all said the same thing. "Where are you, Chloe? Are you okay? You didn't come to the funeral. Everyone was waiting for you at the cemetery." She picked up the phone, took a deep breath, and recorded a voice message in a fragile tone, as if she were still in a state of shock. She sent it to Ethan's family group chat. "I'm so sorry. I passed out this morning. I'm home now. I'm okay, I think. Thank you for your concern." She turned the phone off. She took a cold shower. She dressed without rushing. No black. She put on a blue dress, one Ethan hated because he said it made her look too serious, exactly how he never wanted to see her. Before leaving, she looked in the hallway mirror. The woman who had mourned her widowhood for 3 days was gone. Now, someone else stood before her. A person who was beginning to understand that love doesn't die, but lies can kill. She left the house with no clear destination. She walked for several blocks, as if her feet knew where to go even when she didn't, and she found herself in front of the cemetery gates. She stopped. She wasn't ready. How could you ever be ready? Inside, a headstone with her husband's name awaited her, a headstone without a body, without a soul, without a truth. She entered. The gravel path led her straight to the new grave. There, amid the fresh flowers, wreaths still damp, and a temporary wooden cross, was Ethan's supposed resting place. She stood at a distance, unable to get closer. She felt that if she took another step, she would be accepting a lie, but if she walked away, she would lose the only physical evidence of the deception. She walked toward the cross and looked at it up close. The engraving was done carelessly. Ethan's full name: Ethan Robert Vance. The dates: 1979, 2023. That year, that month, that lie. A light breeze rustled her hair. She felt a chill, even though the sun was beginning to warm the day. She knelt before the grave. She didn't cry. She just thought, who is buried here? Because if Ethan was alive, it meant someone else was underground. A stranger, a stolen corpse. She looked around. The cemetery was almost empty. In the distance, a groundskeeper was tending to another grave. Further on, an elderly woman was placing flowers on a tombstone. Chloe decided to approach her. Something about the woman seemed familiar, as if she had seen her before. "Excuse me," Chloe asked, not sure what she wanted to say. The woman looked at her without emotion. "You're the wife of the young man who was buried yesterday." Chloe nodded slowly. "Yes." The woman observed her with a mixture of pity and judgment. "You weren't here. Everyone noticed. There were a lot of rumors. Some said you fainted. Others said you didn't want to come." Chloe didn't know what to say. She wanted to tell the truth, to scream it, to tell the woman what she had seen at her sister's house, but she couldn't. I haven't been well," she managed to say. The woman placed her flowers on the adjacent grave and sighed. "Sometimes, when a wife doesn't come to the funeral, it's not because of grief. It's because of the truth. And the truth, my dear, always comes out." With that, she walked away. Chloe remained silent. That last sentence sent a shiver down her spine. Had she said it casually, or did she know something? She returned to the grave. This time, she leaned down and touched the earth. It was soft, as if it hadn't been fully compacted yet. She frowned. She was no gardener, but she had been to enough funerals to know that by the next day, the soil was usually much firmer. And then she noticed something. A single white carnation, perfectly placed in the center of the grave. It wasn't part of the other floral arrangements. It stood alone, and underneath it was a small, folded piece of paper, as if intentionally left there. She unfolded it. There were no letters, just an old photograph, a picture from their wedding. Ethan and her, smiling, embracing, young and with eyes full of promises. On the back, written in black ink, "Promises aren't broken, they're buried." Her heart stopped. She looked around frantically. There was no one nearby. Who had left that picture? Who knew so much? She tucked the paper into her bag and walked away, her legs trembling. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run. She wanted to wake up, but she didn't. She hailed a cab and told the driver to take her to the funeral home that had handled everything. She didn't know why, but she needed answers. Details, holes in the story, something to tell her she wasn't going insane. The funeral home was open. A middle-aged woman with a face that showed too little sleep and too many tears greeted her from behind a desk. "How can I help you?" she asked, polite but mechanical. "I'm the wife of Ethan Vance. I just wanted to ask about his service." The woman's eyes widened as if she'd seen a ghost. "My condolences. A terrible loss. Your husband was so young." Chloe nodded. "Yes. Can I see the file? I just want to make sure everything is in order. There are some legal matters I need to sort out." The woman hesitated but retrieved a folder and placed it on the desk. Chloe examined the documents, the death certificate, the body's tag number from the hospital, the transfer, the authorization for cremation. "Cremation? Yes. You signed the authorization." "According to this," the woman said, pointing to a paper. A cold dread washed over Chloe. She had never signed anything. She had never authorized it. In fact, she remembered requesting an open casket, but the hospital had said it wasn't possible because the body's condition was poor. She looked at the signature. It was her name, but not her handwriting. "Can I get a copy of this?" "Of course. Is there a problem?" "Oh, no. It's just for the lawyer. Thank you." She walked out with her heart about to burst. She knew in that moment, this was all planned. Ethan hadn't just faked his death, he had forged documents. He had built a perfect narrative, and someone at that funeral home, or that hospital, or both, had helped him. That night, Chloe didn't go home. She checked into a small hotel on the outskirts of the city. She needed to think in peace, without fear of a knock at the door, without seeing Ethan's shadow in every corner. She sat at the desk and took out a notebook. She started to write. Who signed the cremation permit? Whose body is in the casket? Who left the note on the day of the wake? Who left the photograph at the grave? What does Olivia know? She wrote question after question, each one a loose thread, and she, though broken, would begin to pull every single one. Before falling asleep, she remembered things she had ignored for months. The late-night calls, the unexplained absences, the weekends he claimed to have meetings, the changed password on his phone, the evasive glances when they talked about the future, the excuse that it wasn't the right time to have children. It had all been there, always there. But love, that damned love, had blinded her. She turned off the light, and for the first time, she didn't cry. Ethan hadn't just faked a death. He had murdered the love Chloe had given him. Now, all that remained were empty ashes, and Chloe had no intention of staying in mourning. She intended to dig up the truth, even if she had to do it alone, even if it was the last thing that destroyed her. Chloe returned to her house just as dark clouds began to blanket the sky, threatening rain. She carried the duplicate documents from the funeral home, which she had read at least 5 times in the taxi, still unable to fully grasp their implications. They hadn't just forged her signature, they had cremated a body that likely wasn't Ethan's. Who was in that box? Who had helped orchestrate this fraudulent tragedy? She went inside, locked the door, and didn't turn on any lights. She walked through the dark house, her hands tracing the walls, touching the furniture as if seeking an explanation from them. She passed down the hallway and stopped in front of Ethan's office door. She hesitated for a few seconds before opening it. He had always been possessive of that space, his corner, his world. He never let Chloe clean in there, saying he would do it himself, even though weeks would pass without him touching a thing. Whenever she got too close, Ethan would raise his voice in that gentle but firm tone he used to set boundaries. That insistence now seemed more than suspicious. The door creaked open. The office smelled of old paper, ink, and something else, a musty odor, like humidity trapping secrets. Chloe turned on the desk lamp. Everything was just as he had left it, the closed laptop, the architecture books neatly stacked, the pens perfectly aligned in their holder. It was all too perfect, too clean, as if he had staged his disappearance down to the smallest detail. She began to go through the drawers, work papers, old contracts, project blueprints, receipts. Nothing she hadn't seen before. She opened the bottom drawer of the desk, the deepest one. Inside was a wooden box she had never seen, hand-carved with an old-fashioned latch. It wasn't locked. When she opened it, she found a black notebook, thick, with a hard cover. No title, no name, nothing. She picked it up with both hands. It felt warm, as if it had its own pulse. She sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, and began to read. The first few pages were filled with disjointed phrases, isolated words, dates, and numbers. But as she continued, the content grew darker, clearer, more real. Phase 1. Create emotional distance. Reduce physical contact. Avoid deep conversations. Use work stress as an excuse. Phase 2. Normalize absences. Frequent business trips, late-night meetings. Phase 3. Build alibis. Use Olivia as an intermediary. No one in the family will suspect. Chloe felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Her sister's name was right there, in black and white. It wasn't a suspicion, it was proof. A confession written with the cold precision of a surgeon. She kept reading. An entire page was filled with notes about hospitals, doctors' names, private clinics, contacts. Find a legitimate death certificate. Bribe required. Serenity Meadows Funeral Home verbal agreement closed. Do not mention Chloe. Deal with me directly. She turned the page and found something that made her stomach turn over. Olivia is unsure. Says we should wait. I told her now is the time. Chloe is emotionally vulnerable. It's the perfect opportunity. Underneath was a date. September 7th, 2 weeks before Ethan's fake death. She slammed the notebook shut. She felt like she couldn't breathe. She wanted to scream, but not a single sound came out. He had planned everything. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was a project of disappearance. And her sister was part of the plan. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was a calculated emotional crime. She put the notebook in her bag, stood up, went to the coat closet, and grabbed a trench coat and an umbrella. She was going to find more answers. She headed to Olivia's neighborhood. The sky was releasing a steady, annoying drizzle, as if trying to wash away the world's tracks. She walked the streets like a silent investigator, studying the faces of neighbors, the windows, the doors. She wanted to talk to someone, anyone who might have seen them together. She stopped in front of the small corner deli. A woman in her 50s was arranging boxes of fruit. Chloe approached her. Good afternoon. Excuse me. Do you know Olivia, the woman who lives in the White House on the corner? The woman looked her up and down. Of course, you're the sister. Chloe nodded. Yes. How long have you known her? Since she moved in after her divorce. About 2 years now, I guess. And have you noticed if she has a frequent visitor? The woman wiped her hands on her apron and lowered her voice. I don't like to gossip, but since you're asking, that tall guy with the dark hair and a bit of a beard, he's always coming around at night. Sometimes he's leaving when I'm getting here in the morning. Looks like he lives there. Never introduced himself, but you don't need to guess. They're a couple. It's obvious. Chloe felt the lump in her throat grow. How long have you been seeing him here? Oh, honey, for months. Maybe 6, maybe more. Are you sure it's the same man? The woman frowned. How could I not be? His cologne. I'll never forget it. Same one my ex-husband wore before he left me. Those scents, they stick with you. Chloe thanked her in a weak voice and continued walking. She knocked on the door of the house next to Olivia's. An elderly woman with a curious look opened it. Who is it? Hello, I'm Chloe, Olivia's sister. I just wanted to ask if you've seen a tall, dark-haired man visiting her often. The woman cut her off before she could finish. Oh, the one with the gray pickup truck? Chloe froze. Yes, that's him. Does he live there? Well, sure. That's what we all thought. He comes every night around 10 and leaves at 6. 0 inches the morning. Sometimes he's gone for a few days. I haven't seen him in a couple of weeks, though. Thought they had a fight or went on vacation. I don't know. Turns out he's your husband. Chloe swallowed hard. No, he's not my husband anymore. She said goodbye quickly, unable to listen to another word. Every word was a stab, every testimony slowly stealing her breath. She stopped in front of Olivia's house. She didn't go in, she didn't knock, she didn't want to see her, not yet, but she needed something. She crossed the street and entered the small bakery where they used to buy treats as children. She approached the counter. A young man politely attended to her. "Hello, what can I get for you? How long have you been working here?" 2 years now. "Do you remember a woman named Olivia? Lives right across the street." The young man nodded. "Yes, the one with the garden? She comes in here sometimes with her partner." "Have you seen them recently?" "Last week they came in together. He ordered some bagels. They sat here for a little while. They were talking quietly, but they seemed very comfortable with each other. A lot of trust there." "Do you remember if he ever came in alone?" "Yes, a few times. Once he came in to buy flowers for her from the stand next door. I asked if she was his wife. He said, 'Not yet.'" Chloe felt her knees go weak. "Do you have security cameras?" "We do, but the footage gets erased every 5 days." She nodded. There was nothing more to ask. She walked out into the rain and headed towards Serenity Meadows Funeral Home, the same one that had handled Ethan's service. She entered with the determination of someone who had nothing left to lose. This time, an older man, likely the owner, greeted her. "What can I do for you?" "I'd like to ask about a service you performed a couple of years ago." "Not Ethan Vance. Someone else." The man looked at her skeptically. The name was Caleb Thorne. About 2 years ago, his ex-wife. The man consulted a logbook, frowning. "Yes, Caleb Thorne. Heart attack, direct service. Everything was very quick." "Do you remember if Ethan Vance was involved?" "That name sounds familiar." "Hold on." He stood up and went to the archives, returning with another folder. "Here. He paid for everything. He was the main contact, even though he wasn't a direct relative." Chloe swayed on her feet. "Are you sure?" "I couldn't be mistaken. He even came here himself to pick up the medical certificate a few months before Ethan's own death." Chloe was speechless. The world spun again. Ethan was involved in the funeral of Olivia's ex-husband. Before he faked his own death, before he showed up in her kitchen, before he destroyed everything. She left the funeral home. This time, she didn't cry, nor did she tremble. She walked under the rain as if nothing could make her wetter than what she carried inside. The black notebook was a map of hell, and she was determined to reach its deepest level, even if no one was left alive when she discovered it all, even if she had to crawl through ashes and lies, even if her own blood was tainted, because at this point, the only thing worse than the truth was continuing to live in its shadow. The silence of the early morning was broken only by the sound of rain against the windows. Chloe couldn't sleep. The black notebook lay open on her bed, on the page where Ethan had detailed the participation of a doctor with the initials O.K. It wasn't hard to guess who it was. The same signature appeared on Ethan's death certificate, and also on that of Caleb Thorne, Olivia's ex-husband. The same name, the same slanted handwriting, as if death were just a routine for him. Chloe knew that this doctor wasn't just a pawn. He was part of the machinery. She stood up, still in yesterday's clothes, and searched for the doctor online. His name was Dr. Owen Keene, a general practitioner specializing in emergency medicine. He had a small private clinic but also worked at the hospital where Ethan's body had allegedly been taken. He had an active license, no public complaints, but something made her blood run cold. He had signed over 87 death certificates in the last 3 years, all related to patients with no known family or distant relatives who never came to claim the bodies. The pattern was clear. Someone needed bodies without voices, without histories, without faces, and this man provided them. Chloe wrote down the details in a separate notebook. She didn't want to use Ethan's anymore. That one contained their lies. She needed to build her own truth. The next day, she went to the cemetery where, according to records, Caleb Thorne was buried. The sky was still gray. She had a small garden trowel in her pocket. She didn't plan to exhume a body, but she wanted to confirm something with her own eyes. She found the grave, plot 417B. It had no marble or metal cross, just a simple stone with his name, the dates, and the phrase, "Rest in peace." The plot was isolated, near the cemetery wall. No one else seemed to visit that section. Chloe examined the ground. It wasn't compacted. In fact, there were signs that it had been recently disturbed. The grass that usually grows over time was barely sprouting at the edges, as if the burial had taken place only days ago. She knelt and pushed the trowel into the earth. It sank in easily. There was no seal of lime, cement, or gravel, none of the materials used in permanent burials. That's when she knew. That casket was empty. Or if it wasn't Caleb inside. Impossible. Everything was too similar to what had happened with Ethan. She heard footsteps. She quickly stood up, hid the trowel, and pretended to be praying. A cemetery caretaker walked by, giving her a suspicious look but saying nothing. When he was gone, Chloe took pictures with her phone, focusing on the soft earth, the still fresh flowers, and the lack of an official marker from the municipality. It was all evidence. She decided to check the public records. She needed to confirm if Caleb, before his death, had made any changes to his assets. She went to the county clerk's office, where she could request public wills. Pretending to be a close friend, she provided the Social Security number she had found in Ethan's notebook. After waiting nearly 2 hours, she was given a simple copy of the last will, registered by Caleb Thorne, dated 1 month before his death. She read it carefully. Her fears were confirmed. Caleb had left everything to Olivia: a house on the coast, a savings account, and a life insurance policy. Before that date, his sole heir had been a nephew living abroad. The change was sudden, too convenient. Chloe paused on one clause. The will was notarized by a man named Attorney Sterling Croft. She looked him up online. Surprise! He was the same notary who had validated a special power of attorney that Ethan had granted to someone with the vague name R.V.H. Who was that? A hidden lawyer? A fake identity? The pattern was undeniable. Doctors, notaries, funeral homes. A network, a structure that allowed them to fake deaths, hide bodies, and erase tracks. And at the center of it all were Ethan and Olivia. That night, Chloe couldn't stay in the house. She felt like the walls were watching her. She went out for a walk with no direction until she found herself in a small dive bar downtown, one of those places where no one asks questions. She ordered a coffee and sat at a table in the back. She took out her notes and began to connect the dots. She drew lines in red pencil: Ethan, Caleb, Olivia. And in the middle, the word money. "Always so serious, aren't you?" a voice said, making her look up. An older man with white hair and small, piercing eyes was standing at her table. He wore a gray jacket and had a stern expression. He didn't look like a customer. He didn't belong there. "Do I know you?" "No, but you should. I'm Silas Thorne, Caleb's brother." Chloe swallowed. There was no brother on record. "I thought he had no close relatives. That's what they said at the funeral, but no one bothered to ask me." Silas stared at her, then sat down without being invited. "I know who you are, Chloe. I know about Ethan, about Olivia, and I know you're not crazy. I have questions too, a lot of them. Why are you showing up now?" Silas slid a folder across the table: photos, documents, copies of messages. "Because I've been investigating my brother's death for 2 years. I never believed it was a heart attack. He was an athlete, healthy, and because when I saw the pictures of your husband, I recognized his face. He's the same man who introduced himself as my brother's lawyer. I saw him. I confronted him. He said he was a financial manager. Then he disappeared. A few days later, Caleb was dead." Chloe felt her heart pound in her chest. "Why didn't you go to the police?" "I tried, but I had no proof. Just a gut feeling. Until now." He pushed a photograph toward her. A picture taken from a distance, blurry but clear. Ethan, entering Olivia's house. They were holding hands. It was dated 3 months before his death. "What do you want?" "The same thing you want, to expose them. But not just any way. We need to expose them in a way they can't hide from. If they're burying the living or stealing identities, this goes beyond our families. This is a criminal network." Chloe looked at him with doubt, but also with a sense of necessity. She couldn't do this alone anymore. "I need to know if Caleb is really dead. I have a contact at the morgue. Tomorrow we can confirm if his body ever passed through there or not. If it never arrived, your theory is correct. And we're not chasing ghosts, but accomplices." Chloe agreed, not out of trust, but out of desperation. That night, she returned to the hotel with a strange mix of strength and nausea. The idea that Olivia might have killed Caleb, or worse, that Ethan had assumed his identity, was no longer an exaggeration. It was a possibility. Before sleeping, she opened the black notebook again. She read a page she had previously overlooked. Next phase: clean accounts, close cycles. Start over with a new name. Everything is ready for Olivia. The rest depends on timing. That new name made her think. What if Ethan was no longer Ethan? What if he had replaced Caleb, or someone else? She looked at the ceiling, the echo of her own breathing, the only thing keeping her on this side of sanity, because now she knew there wasn't just one fake funeral, there were two, and perhaps, soon, there would be more. That idea replayed in Chloe's mind like a sentence. The nights felt endless, her eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling, constantly re-examining the connections, the faces, the words written in her notebook. Ethan hadn't faked his death just to escape her. There was something darker, colder behind it. It wasn't just infidelity, it was a pattern, a system, a network. The next morning, Silas picked her up in front of the hotel. He had another folder. Chloe opened it as soon as she got in the car. It contained copies of emails, printed text messages, surveillance photos. In most of the images, Ethan, or the man she thought was her husband, appeared. In some, he called himself Alvaro. In others, Cesar. In a few documents, he appeared with an ID in the name of Reese Valerius. "Where did you get these?" "A woman contacted me a few months ago," Silas answered, his eyes on the road. "She said she knew him as Reese." He introduced himself as a businessman, a widower with a daughter in Europe. He borrowed money for a real estate investment. When she started to suspect something, he vanished. "How did you find her?" "On a forum for victims of romance scams. I started it out of desperation. I never thought anyone would answer." Chloe examined one of the emails the woman had sent to Silas. It contained screenshots of a conversation. The phrases were identical to what Ethan had told her for years. "No one has ever understood me like you do. You're the only one who makes me feel alive. I just need to sort out a family issue, and then we can be together forever." It was like watching a play repeated for different audiences. Silas handed her a number written on a napkin. "Call her. Her name is Sophia. She's willing to talk to you." Chloe made the call from a public payphone. The voice on the other end was firm, steady, with a calmness forged from ashes. "Hello, Chloe. I've been waiting for you." They met in a quiet coffee shop far from the city center. Sophia was a woman in her 40s, elegant but not ostentatious. Her gaze had the hardness of someone who had seen too much and learned to doubt everything. "When he told me his wife died of cancer, I cried with him," Sophia began, without preamble. "He took me to a fake grave. He brought flowers. He kissed me while he wept. He made me believe his pain was real." Chloe said nothing, just listened, as if picking up the pieces of her own story in every word. "He borrowed $50,000 to invest in a piece of land. He showed me papers, blueprints. Everything looked legitimate. I never thought it was a scam until he disappeared." "Where did you meet him?" "At a Chamber of Commerce event. He introduced himself as Reese Valerius. He said he owned a construction materials company. He said he had just moved after his wife died." Chloe took out a page from the black notebook and showed it to her. That name was among Ethan's contacts. Sophia read it attentively. "This one, Carlos L. Peña," he mentioned him. "He said he was his trusted architect, but I don't know if he ever really existed." They spent the afternoon sharing details. Sophia showed photos, bank receipts, emails. Each one fit perfectly, like a piece of a larger puzzle. Before they parted, Sophia said something that made Chloe's blood run cold. "There's someone else. Her name is Jocelyn. She's a private investigator. I hired her after Reese disappeared, and she already knows about you." Chloe bit her lip. "What does she know?" "She'll find you. She's building a case to sue him. She has access to bank movements, images, wiretaps. She doesn't just want justice, she wants to bury him any way she can." That night, Chloe only slept for 3 hours. The next day, she received a call from an unknown number. A cold, professional voice. "This is Jocelyn. I know who you are, and I know what you're looking for. Are you ready to see this through to the end? There's no turning back." They met in an apartment with sealed windows and drawn curtains. Jocelyn had everything laid out on a table: folders, hard drives, USBs, printed photos. He's used at least 5 identities in the last 8 years. He's faked his death twice. He was involved with 3 women simultaneously, and he's been moving money to accounts in Panama, Uruguay, and Switzerland. Chloe was stunned. "You have proof?" "I have everything I need to destroy him. I'm just missing one thing: your testimony." Chloe handed her the black notebook. Jocelyn examined it with forensic precision. "This is gold. It has dates, names, roots. It's a criminal's logbook." They spent hours organizing the information. For the first time, Chloe felt useful. She was no longer just the betrayed wife, she was part of something bigger. Jocelyn pulled out a thick file. Inside were copies of bank transfers. One of them caught her eye, a large sum sent to an account in the name of Verna Rivas. Chloe felt her feet go cold. How much? $25,000. Transferred 1 month before Ethan's death from an account linked to Reese Valerius. "Insurance. Look at this." Jocelyn handed her a copy of the policy. Ethan had named Olivia as the sole beneficiary. Issue date: 3 months before the fake accident. Cause of death: car accident. How did she get it? The payment was frozen. An alert was triggered for possible fraud, but someone pulled some strings. The file is still under review. Chloe closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them, she was no longer the same person. "We'll sue him." "Not yet," Jocelyn corrected. "We'll build the case. We'll leak it to the press. We'll expose all of them: Ethan, Olivia, the doctor, the notary, the funeral home. If we attack them legally, they'll hide. But if we make them public, they'll have nowhere to run." Chloe nodded. Silas arrived later. When he saw all the information they had gathered, his eyes welled up. "I never thought we'd get this far." Chloe looked at him, and "We're just getting started." In the following days, they compiled a joint file. They organized every piece of evidence into digital folders. They made backups. They contacted an independent journalist. She agreed to hear the story, skeptical at first, but when she saw the documents, her expression changed. "This is dynamite, but I need more. I need an interview." Chloe agreed. They recorded it in an undisclosed room, her face partially obscured. Her voice trembled at first, but as she spoke, her strength returned. "My husband faked his death. My sister was his accomplice. What they did wasn't just betrayal, it was a scam, an emotional, legal, and moral crime." The journalist promised to air the report in 2 weeks. She asked them not to leave the city. That night, Chloe received a text message from an unknown number. "I know what you're doing. Stop digging. You don't know who you're up against." She smiled for the first time since it all began, because now she knew he was scared, because now she was the one moving the pieces. Chloe no longer hesitated when she spoke. Her steps were firm, her gaze direct. There was no room for doubt. Ethan's betrayal had once broken her, but the new Chloe wasn't made to suffer. She was made to expose monsters, and she wouldn't do it alone. The next morning, she met Silas at the office of a criminal defense attorney. He had convinced his parents, the parents of the late Caleb Thorne, to initiate legal proceedings and request the exhumation of the body buried as their son. Chloe stayed on the sidelines during the meeting, but her presence was crucial. She had gathered enough evidence to document the irregularities, and now, finally, the wheels of justice seemed to be turning away from the lies. "With this," the lawyer said, holding up the compiled file, "we will request a court order to verify the identity of the body. We need forensic evidence, and any judge with a shred of decency will grant it. Chloe felt a nervous tremor, but also a glimmer of hope. If they could open that grave and confirm Caleb wasn't inside, a bomb would detonate in their hands. The story wouldn't just change for her, but for everyone Ethan and his network of shadows had touched. That night in her apartment, Chloe poured herself a glass of wine. She was reviewing the documents for the umpteenth time when her phone rang. Blocked number. She answered cautiously. "Hello." A man's voice, raspy and low. "Some truths are deadly, Chloe. Let the graves stay closed." He hung up. The phone trembled in her hands. She ran to lock the windows and double-check the doors. The threat was real. This wasn't paranoia. It was a warning. She called Jocelyn, who answered immediately. "I just got a threat over the phone. Don't answer any more blocked numbers and come stay with me. It's safer. I have cameras, an alarm, and private security. Don't take any chances." Chloe packed only the essentials and left. The wind outside howled as if it, too, knew something dark was coming. She walked quickly to a main avenue and hailed a cab. During the ride, she thought about how easily Ethan had created identities, moved money, and lied. But what hurt the most was how close she had been to him for so many years without ever seeing who he really was. When she arrived at Jocelyn's apartment, she was greeted with a silent hug. No words were needed. They both knew that crossing the line from private investigation to public exposure made them targets. "You're safe here." "For now," Jocelyn said. That night, they slept with the lights on. The next morning, while reviewing the documents again, Chloe noticed something she had missed. A seemingly insignificant receipt bearing the name of the doctor who had signed both Caleb's and Ethan's death certificates, Dr. Owen Keene. Next to his signature was a small logo for a clinic she didn't recognize. She looked up the clinic online. When she checked its contact page, she made a disturbing discovery. Among the members of the board of directors was the name of the notary, Attorney Sterling Croft, the same man who had handled Ethan's will. Chloe took a deep breath. She had to be sure. She dug deeper. She found an old article from a university magazine. A black-and-white photo showed 3 young men being honored for a legal medical project. Owen Keene, Sterling Croft, and a third whose face was none other than Ethan's, under the name Esteban Garcia. Another alias, another disguise. They were classmates, the 3 of them, Chloe told Jocelyn. This network was built a long time ago. It's not a coincidence. It's a system. Jocelyn looked at her gravely. "And you're at the center of it." That afternoon, as they were returning from the grocery store, Chloe noticed something strange. A dark van was parked across from the building. It wasn't from the neighborhood. It had no license plates. As they passed in front of it, she felt eyes on her. She didn't dare look directly, but fear returned to her chest like a sleeping beast woken with a roar. That night, they reviewed the security footage. At 3 a.m., someone had tried to force the building's entrance. They didn't get in, the alarm sounded, and they fled. But this was no ordinary thief. They wore gloves, a ski mask, and took nothing. Jocelyn reported the incident. Chloe felt the noose tightening. They were getting close to something they couldn't let see the light of day, and she wasn't going to back down. The next morning, a white envelope with no return address appeared in Jocelyn's mailbox. Chloe opened it with gloves, as Jocelyn had taught her. Inside, a single piece of paper with one sentence: "Ethan isn't the only one. There are many more like him." Jocelyn looked at her, unsurprised. "I told you. This goes beyond one relationship. We're uncovering a pattern. People who live on lies. Men who disappear, who steal lives, identities, inheritances. They are specialists. They are emotional predators." Chloe felt a mix of terror and determination. It was like an invisible jungle, and she, unknowingly, had entered it armed only with love. The hearing for the exhumation was scheduled quickly, thanks to the lawyer's efforts and the public pressure generated by the journalist's report. Caleb's parents attended, their faces etched with sorrow but with an unbreakable dignity. The judge listened to the arguments, reviewed the evidence, and finally signed the order. The grave will be opened in 5 days, under forensic supervision, with all parties present, he declared. Chloe left the courthouse with her heart pounding so hard it felt like it would break free from her chest. She had waited so long for this moment that now she was terrified of what she would find. Silas met her outside. If Caleb isn't in there, everything changes. Chloe nodded. And if he is, it changes too. Days later, at the cemetery, the earth was dug up in front of the judge, the family, a designated forensic expert, and several court officials. The casket was raised. Chloe felt her breath catch in her throat. The judge ordered it opened. Inside, there was a body, or at least what was left of one, but the forensic expert, after examining the remains, delivered the first revelation. The dental records do not match. What does that mean? Chloe asked, her voice a whisper. It means this body is not Caleb Thorne. It belongs to someone else. The judge immediately ordered an investigation. The scandal quickly spread through the media. Wrong body exhumed, funeral home under suspicion, serial death scam. Those were just some of the headlines Chloe watched from afar. She wasn't celebrating yet. She knew this was just the beginning. That night, in front of the mirror, she whispered to herself, I will find you, Ethan. Even if it costs me my life. Even if I have to go down to hell with you. Because the truth isn't just buried underground. It's in the silences, in the fake names, in the forged signatures, in the empty graves, and in every lie that was now beginning to rot in the light of day. The media smelled blood like sharks in the ocean. The scandal was unstoppable. The exhumation of the wrong body had exposed a network of corruption, identity theft, and fraud involving inheritances, life insurance, and wills. Chloe, against everything she had ever believed, became the face of a truth more painful than 1,000 funerals, a truth that cried out for justice. The journalist, Sloane Wallace, the only one who had believed her from the beginning, was given everything by Chloe. The notebooks, documents, recordings, photos, anonymous letters, and the testimonies of other women. And Sloane, with a mix of professionalism and personal fury, she had lost a relative to medical malpractice, prepared a report that would shake the nation. The program aired during prime time. Chloe sat on the sofa with Jocelyn, while other victims were connected via video call. The lights were off. Her heart pounded as if it would explode. "Good evening," Sloane began. "What you are about to see tonight is not fiction. It is a true story. It is the story of how a woman was declared a widow, while her husband had breakfast with her sister in a house just a few blocks from the cemetery. The screen showed the documents, the doctors' names, the connections between funeral homes, the testimonies of other women, the money transfers, the life insurance policy in Olivia's favor, the certificates with manipulated dates, the dental record discrepancies of the exhumed body. It was impossible to watch and not feel rage, impossible not to become part of the cause. Minutes after the program, Chloe's name was a trending topic. The invisible widow had captured the hearts of viewers, but it wasn't fame she sought, it was justice. The district attorney's office didn't take long to issue a statement. A formal investigation was opened. Arrest warrants were issued for Ethan Gaitan, his real name for Olivia Herrera, for Dr. Owen Keene, and for the notary, Sterling Croft. The network began to crumble. Ethan and Olivia went into hiding. The police tracked their movements. They withdrew cash in small amounts, sold a car illegally, and bought bus tickets to the north of the country. They were running, but the world was quickly closing in on them. A week later, Chloe received an unexpected call. Not from the authorities, not from the media. It was Olivia. "What do you want?" Chloe asked, her voice hard. "I want to talk. Just the two of us. I don't want to go to jail. I'll give you whatever you want. Money, property, we can make a deal. No one has to know everything." "They already know, Olivia. The whole country knows. You can still make it quiet. You're the perfect victim. Everyone believes you. But I can make this go away." "Just name your price." Chloe fell silent. Every word from her sister was a rusty dagger twisting in her memory. Blood may bind, but betrayal turns that bond into a suffocating rope. "How much is your conscience worth, Chloe?" Olivia insisted. Not enough to sell out everyone you two destroyed." And she hung up. It was the last time she heard her voice. 4 days later, in a border town, a woman noticed a nervous-looking man at a bus terminal. He was pretending to be a tourist, but his accent was off. She alerted a police officer. He was arrested. He was carrying a fake ID, illegal passports, cash, and an envelope of photographs. It was Ethan. When asked his name, he didn't answer. All he said was, "She won." The prosecutor's office informed Chloe. The victims were allowed to attend the first hearing. She went. She saw him enter in handcuffs. He looked older, haggard. He was no longer the charming man who had wooed her. He was a broken mask, fallen, exposed. Ethan looked at her. Chloe held his gaze. She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. She didn't speak. She just watched him with a silence more scorching than any scream. Olivia was caught 2 days later in a nearby motel. She had tried to slit her wrists. She didn't die. She was saved and transferred to a holding cell. During the transfer, she screamed nonsense, claiming Ethan had manipulated her, that she knew nothing, that she had only signed papers, that she had always been jealous of her sister, that it was all a show. But no one believed her. The trial would last for months. The sentences were uncertain. But Chloe didn't wait for the verdict to do what her soul needed. She went back to the cemetery. She walked among the tombstones until she reached the spot that once bore Ethan's name. The marble was now blank, unerased. The earth was upturned, and no one had bothered to fix it. Chloe knelt, touched the soil, and closed her eyes. "This is where the woman I used to be died. Today, I am reborn." She didn't need ceremonies. She didn't need revenge. She had all the answers. She had gambled her life, her mental health, her sanity, her faith in love, in family, in truth. And despite it all, she was still alive. More alive than ever. That night, she wrote a letter. She posted it on her social media, the same place where hundreds had written to her over the weeks, offering support, sharing their own stories of being betrayed by relatives, lovers, and corrupt systems. The letter said, "For years I was a loyal wife, a loving sister, a woman who trusted, until they buried me alive. They called me a widow while my husband slept in another bed. They called me crazy while I told the truth. But I have learned that the truth needs no defense when it is supported by evidence. I have learned that blood does not always bind. Sometimes it also poisons. I have learned that not all wounds are visible, and there are mornings that do not end with flowers. There are mornings that end with justice. This story is not just mine. It is for all the people who have been silenced by love, fear, or shame. Today, I tell you, speak up, fight back, be silent no more. Because if lies are shadows, then truth is a fire. And it burns, it cleanses, and it hurts. Oh, but it also sets you free." The comments poured in by the thousands. "Thank you for your strength. Thank you for speaking for those of us who couldn't. Thank you for surviving." Chloe didn't seek fame or recognition. She just wanted to be free. And finally, she was. She never remarried. She didn't trust easily again. But she began to build something different, a life where she didn't have to explain her scars, where she could plant love in different soil, far from the mud she had once mistaken for a garden. She founded an organization to support victims of emotional and financial scams. She shares her story at universities, conferences, and on social media, not as a hero, but as a living testimony that one can fall and rise again. And if anyone asks her if it was all worth it, she answers, "It wasn't worth losing so much, but it was worth not losing the most important thing, my truth." Because in the end, the only thing that remains when everything has burned down are the things the fire cannot touch: the soul, dignity, and the courage to start anew. If you enjoyed this story, I invite you to leave in the comments what you felt while listening to it. And if you have gone through a similar situation of deception, I would like you to share your valuable opinion. Many people are going through similar situations. We hope your voice can bring them to life. Share this story and be part of the change. Remember to tell me which city you're watching this video from. I would be honored if you left me a like, shared the video with a friend or relative, and subscribed to the channel. Don't miss the next amazing story that is appearing on your screen right now. We have guaranteed entertainment exclusively for you.